Have you ever wondered if war is a mistake? A tragic error in the calculation of civilized species? We look at the stars and we see silence. We look at history and we see ruins. But there is one species that looks at the burning galaxy and sees only a playground. One species that does not mourn the fallen, for they were never truly alive in the way we understand it. To understand the Ork, you must first understand the silence that came before the scream. You must understand the desperation that forces a creator to forge a weapon they can never unmake. War is not an accident, it is a design. Let us drift back, further back than the Imperium, further back than the Rod of Nurgle or the laughter of the dark gods. We must go to the very beginning, to the first convulsion of creation, where vast insensate forces kindled the first suns and spilled light across a newborn cosmos. It was here, in this ancient furnace, that the stage was set for the green tide. In those early days, from the Milky Way's cradles of stone, came the first civilization capable of spanning the stars, the reptilian Old Ones. Imagine them not as warriors, but as architects. They were cold-blooded, patient, and immeasurably learned. To them, the universe was not a battlefield, but a garden to be tended. They raised astronomy and physics to an art so refined it appears today as sorcery. They bent the warp to work and seeded a galaxy-wide lattice of instantaneous portals, the warp gates, linking their colonies like nerves. They walked between worlds. They reshaped countless planets to specification. They sowed new intelligences. They were the masters of life itself. But in their mastery, did they ever fear what they might create? While the Old Ones drifted through their webway, basking in their near immortality, another people baked beneath a murderous sun on a blasted world among the halo stars. These were the Necrons. Bathed in deadly radiation from birth, the Necrons lived brief, cancer-scarred lives. Their cities were not monuments to life, but mausoleums in waiting. Their dynasties measured greatness in tombs, not courts. Can you imagine the envy? To look up at the stars and know that somewhere, beings exist who will never know the touch of tumors, who will never feel their flesh fail before their minds are ready to rest. Jealous fury seized the Necrons even as the cancers ate at their flesh. They met the Old Ones, and the Old Ones would not share their secret of long life. And so the universe learned its first lesson in hate. If they would not share their secrets of immortality, the Necrons would rip it from them. Thus began the war in heaven. But the Necrons could not win, not alone. Their technology struck hard, but the Old Ones' mastery of the webway and the warp made them unassailable. The Necrons were pushed back, exiled toward the halo stars, simmering in hatred, and it seemed the war was over. It seemed the Old Ones had triumphed through patience and superiority, but desperation is a powerful summoner. Whether it was an accidental probe's reading in a dying star or a beacon of species-wide hatred that drew predators, the Necrons found something in the dark. They awoke entities of pure electromagnetic consciousness. These were the Citan, the star gods. The Necrons gave them bodies of living metal, necrodermis, and in exchange the Citan offered them the one thing they craved, immortality. But as with all bargains struck in the dark, the price was higher than they could have dreamed. In titanic biofoundries, whole populations of the Necrons marched into furnaces where flesh and souls were stripped away. They were replaced by necrodermis shells, animated only by the guttering echo of self. Above these foundries, the Citan feasted on the cast-off essence of an entire species. The Necrons were born, and with them, the war changed. Empowered by their feast, the Citan led undying legions of the newly born Necrons to eclipse the Old Ones. Worlds burned, suns died, Entire systems vanished into newborn singularities. The Necrons breached the webway, turning the Old One's greatest strength against them. Now, put yourself in the mind of an Old One. You are a master of life, a shaper of worlds. You have watched civilizations rise and fall, but now death has come for you. Not the natural death of entropy, but a cold, metallic death that does not sleep, does not tire, and does not stop. Your webway is compromised. Your science is failing. What you do when your enemy has abandoned their souls to become the perfect killing machines. You build a better beast. Cornered the Old One's birthed weapons of soul and thought. They realized that the Citan, these star gods of the material realm, were vulnerable to the warp. Warp kindled might prove anathema to the Citan, and so the Old Ones began to uplift and create warrior species. They created the Eldari to channel psychic power. They created the Ration, the Canib, and they created another. A species designed not for art, not for philosophy, but for the brutality of total war. At their height, more than 60 million standard years ago, the Old Ones uplifted or created the species later known as the Krork, the forerunners of the Orks. This is the moment the galaxy changed forever. The Krork were not merely soldiers, they were biological weapon systems. The Old Ones did not just give them strong bodies, they embedded war into their very genetic code. They made them hardy, able to survive where others would perish. They made them reproduce through spores, ensuring that wherever they fell, more would rise. The Old Ones sowed new intelligences to fight a war of extinction. The Krork were designed to stand against the Necrons' gas flares and the Citan's reality-bending powers. They were built to be the anvil upon which the Necron dynasties would break. And for a time, it worked. The slaughter of the war in heaven churned the sea of souls. The psychic excesses of the new races, the Eldari, the Krork, destabilized the warp, but the Old Ones lost control. The warp convulsed. Formless entities became predators. The realm of chaos coalesced. Then came the enslavers, warp beings that poured into real space. The Old Ones were fighting a war on two fronts, the Necrons in the material world, and the horrors of the warp in the immaterial. In the end, scattered and shattered, the Old Ones fell. They became extinct or fled beyond knowing. The Necrons, seeing the galaxy ruined by warp spawn and enslavers, chose to sleep. The Silent King, Szarek, ordered every Necron city remade into a tomb complex and commanded a sleep of 60 million years. They would wait for the galaxy to heal, for the Eldar to rise and fade, and for the galaxy to repopulate with lesser, more pliable life. But what of the Krork? The Old Ones were gone. The Necrons were asleep. The war that they were built for was over. But you cannot simply turn off a biological weapon. You cannot tell a species designed for infinite conflict to lay down its arms and become farmers. The Krork were left alone in a galaxy that had burned itself out. Without the guidance of the Old Ones, without the focus of the war in heaven, they began to change. The complex, towering warriors of the ancient era began to devolve. The intricate genetic programming that made them the perfect soldiers degraded, but the core drive remained. The drive to fight, the drive to conquer, the drive to win. The Krork became the Orks, and while the Necrons slept in their stasis crypts, the Orks drifted. They survived the enslaver plagues. They survived the birth of Slanesh. They survived the long dark ages of the galaxy. They are the orphans of the greatest war in history. But they are not sad orphans. They do not mourn their creators. For the Orks, the universe is exactly as it should be, a place of endless battle, a place where the strong survive and the weak are crushed. The old ones may be gone, but their weapon is still firing. And now, 60 million years later, the green tide is rising again. They are not fighting for the old ones anymore. They are fighting for the sheer, unadulterated joy of it. But how does a fungus become a warrior? How does a biological weapon function without a trigger? The biology of the orc is a miracle of impossible engineering, a secret that makes the Adeptus Mechanicus tremble. Mechanica, the weapon the old ones forged, did not rust with time. It did not falter when its masters vanished into the void, or when the Necrons retreated into their tomb worlds to sleep away the aeons. Instead, the weapon took root. It looked at the galaxy, stripped of its architects, and decided that it was no longer a battlefield to be won, but a garden to be cultivated. A garden of war. To understand the persistence of the orc, one must look past the crude iron of their axes and the roaring thunder of their guns. One must look at the blood that pumps beneath that thick green skin. The genius of their creation lies not in their capacity for violence, which is immense, but in their capacity for life. They are the perfect survivors, designed to endure in environments that would wither a human soul and crush a machine spirit. An orc is not merely a biological entity in the way we understand it. They are a symbiosis, a seamless fusion of animal and fungus. This is the great secret that the magos biologies of the Imperium whisper in their sterile laboratories. The orc's cellular structure is a hybrid. The animal flesh provides the muscle, the aggression, the complex nervous system required to aim a weapon or pilot a ship. But the fungal element, the algae that saturates their tissue, provides the resilience. It is this algae that gives them their green hue, but it does so much more. It breaks down the lactic acid in their muscles, allowing them to fight for days without fatigue. It knits their flesh together at speeds that defy medical science. An orc can lose a limb and feel only a momentary annoyance. If the limb is found and stapled back on by a pain boy, the crude surgeons of their society, the fungal threads will reach out, reconnect, and seal the wound within hours. They do not understand trauma. They do not understand shock. To an orc, pain is simply information, a signal that the battle is getting interesting. But the true horror of this symbiotic design, the aspect that keeps Imperial commanders awake in the long watches of the night, is their reproduction. The old ones knew that supply lines are the weakness of any army. They knew that reinforcements require logistics, so they removed the need for both. The orc is a self-contained ecosystem. Throughout its life, an orc sheds spores, microscopic airborne seeds that drift on the wind, settle in the dust of a city's ruins, or cling to the hull of a void ship. These spores are resilient enough to survive the vacuum of space and the scorching heat of atmospheric entry. When an orc falls in battle, this release accelerates. A dying orc releases a massive pulse of spores, a final act of biological defiance. To kill an orc is to plant a forest. Wherever these spores land, if the conditions are dark and damp, the cycle begins. First, the simple fungi grow, preparing the soil. Then come the squigs, beasts of mouth and appetite that serve as food, leather, and guard dogs. Then the snotlings and grots, the lesser servants who will build the infrastructure. And finally, from deep, pulsing cocoons beneath the earth, the orcs themselves tear their way into the world. They emerge fully formed, knowing how to walk, how to fight, and how to hate. Imagine a planet cleansed by orbital bombardment. The cities are glass, the forests are ash. The Imperial Guard declares the world compliant and moves on. But deep in the bedrock, in the sewers, in the shadowed cracks of the world, the spores are waiting. A year later, a patrol goes missing. 5 years later, a settlement is raided. 10 years later, the Wa begins anew. They are the weed that cannot be pulled, the stain that cannot be scrubbed clean. This biological immortality is matched only by their technological anomaly. The Ork mind is a chaotic place, a storm of aggression and instinct. They do not learn in the traditional sense. A human engineer spends decades studying the rights of the machine god to understand the workings of a plasma reactor. An Ork mech boy simply looks at a pile of scrap metal and knows. The knowledge is genetic. It is encoded in their DNA by the old ones, locked away until the moment it is needed. A mech boy does not know why he is welding a copper wire to a rusty pipe. He just knows that if he does, it will make a loud noise and kill things. They build ships that defy physics. They construct weapons that should explode in their hands. And yet they work. They work because of the second great gift of the old ones, the Gestalt field, the Wa energy. The Orks are a latent psychic race. They do not draw from the warp in the way of the Eldar or the human psyker, channeling it through a single mind. Instead, they generate a collective psychic field that grows stronger the more of them are gathered in one place. It is a field of pure belief. If 1,000,000 Orks believe that a red truck goes faster, the universe, bending under the sheer weight of that belief, lubricates the laws of physics. The truck goes faster. If they believe a gun will not jam, the mechanism cycles smoothly, despite the rust and the grit. If they believe their leader is invulnerable, his skin hardens against bullets that should pierce it. They are reality shapers, unaware of their own power. They brute force the universe into submission, not through understanding, but through ignorance. They do not know it is impossible, and so, for them, it becomes possible. This field also serves as their beacon. It connects them. When a leader rises, a war boss sufficiently large and brutal to command the respect of his peers, he acts as a lightning rod for this energy. The Wa grows. It calls to Orks across star systems, a subconscious drumbeat that drives them to gather, to build, and to launch themselves into the void. It creates a society that is a meritocracy of violence. In Ork society, size is authority. The more an Ork fights, the larger he grows. The larger he grows, the more the Wa energy flows through him and the more authority he commands. It is a perfect, self-regulating system. There is no politics, only strength. If you want to lead, you must kill the leader. If you fail, you were not meant to lead. Their currency is teeth. Teeth, because teeth rot and degrade, forcing the economy to remain active. You cannot hoard wealth. You must constantly punch it out of the mouths of your rivals. It prevents inflation. It ensures that the rich are also the strong. It is a brutal, primitive system, yet it has sustained them for 60 million years. While greater civilizations have crumbled into dust, in this galaxy of fading lights and ancient terrors, the Orks are perhaps the only ones who are truly free. They do not fear the dark. They do not fear the demon. They do not fear death, for they believe in reincarnation, that Gork and Mork, their twin gods, will simply spit them back out to fight again. They are the green tide, a force of nature that does not hate you any more than a hurricane hates the house it tears apart. They simply are, and they are coming. But even a tide has currents. Even a mob has structure. As the Orks gather, they fracture into clans, distinct cultures of war that color their violence in different shades. From the speed-addicted cults to the hoarders of wealth, the clans define how the galaxy burns. They do not have nations. They have instincts painted in primary colors. If you look down from the stratosphere at an Ork infestation, you do not see the orderly grid of an imperial hive or the graceful curves of an Eldari craft world. You see a patchwork quilt of rust and smoke. But look closer. There is a pattern in the anarchy. There is a hierarchy in the horde. The old ones did not just create a soldier, they created a society that sorts itself. As the orcs drift together, drawn by the wah, they naturally fracture into clans. These are not families born of blood, but philosophies born of violence. A young orc does not choose his clan. The clan is already in his blood, waiting to manifest. First, there are the Goths. Imagine a tide of black iron. They are the biggest, the meanest, the most unimaginatively brutal of their kind. They do not care for strategy. They do not care for speed. They care for the visceral, bone-crunching satisfaction of melee combat. They paint themselves in black and white checkers, the colors of death and stark reality. To a Goth, fighting is not a means to an end. It is the end itself. They are the anchor of the green tide, the heavy infantry that simply walks through enemy fire because they are too stubborn to die. Then, there are the bad moons. Do you remember the currency of teeth? The bad moons are the merchant princes of this savage economy. Their teeth grow faster than any other clan, making them naturally wealthy. And because they are rich, they buy the best guns. They cover their armor in gold and yellow paint, believing that wealth breeds power. They are the heavy support, unleashing walls of Daka, firepower, not because they are accurate, but because they can afford to waste the ammunition. They are the proof that in orc society, greed is a survival trait. Contrast them with the evil Soons. These are the speed freaks, the adrenaline junkies. For an evil Sun, the ground is something to be left behind. They are obsessed with engines, with fuel, with the blur of the horizon. They paint their vehicles red, tapping into that latent psychic belief that red things move faster. And they do. They are the cavalry, the blitzkrieg, the thunder of exhausts that drowns out the screams of the dying. They don't want to hold territory. They want to run it over. But who scavenges the dead? The death skulls. They are the looters, the thieves. They paint themselves blue, the color of luck, because they believe that fortune favors the audacious. They strip the battlefield bare before the smoke has even cleared. A Death Skull's tank is a Frankenstein's monster of stolen Imperial plating, Eldar anti-grav engines, and Tau railguns, all welded together and working purely because the mech boy thinks it should. They are the ultimate recyclers, turning the debris of war into the weapons of the next assault. There are the Blood Axes, the only orcs who make the Imperium truly nervous. Why? Because they think. They use camouflage. They retreat when losing. They trade with humans. To other orcs, they are un-orky, cowardly even. But to a human commander, they are a nightmare, an enemy that learns. And finally, the snakebites, the traditionalists who shun technology for the old ways, riding massive squiggoths into battle, trusting in leather and bone over steel and circuit. These clans fight each other constantly. They brawl over scrap, over teeth, over who has the loudest truck. But this infighting is not a weakness. It is a crucible. It ensures that when a leader finally rises who is strong enough to unite them, he is leading the absolute fittest survivors of 1,000,000 civil wars. And what do they worship, these clans? They do not look to the sky for salvation. They look for Gork and Morg. The twin gods of the orcs are not distant deities. They are distinct, powerful, and terrified of nothing. Gork is brutal but cunning. He hits you when you are looking. Morg is cunning but brutal. He hits you when you are not looking. It is a simple theology, is it not? But it captures the duality of war perfectly. The frontal assault and the flank, the hammer and the knife. The orcs believe their gods are constantly fighting each other in the warp, laughing as they brawl, and they believe that when they die, they simply join the fight. There is no hell for an orc. There is only the Great Green, a paradise of eternal conflict. This belief system makes them immune to the temptations of chaos. Khorne, the blood god, looks at the orcs and sees perfect warriors. He offers them power, blood, skulls. And the orcs? They laugh. They do not need Khorne. They have Gork and Mork. Why worship a god of rage when you are already happy? Why bargain for power when you are already the strongest? The Chaos gods find no purchase in the orc soul because the orc soul is already full. It is full of the Wah. And sometimes the Wah produces something strange. Among the ranks of the boys, there are the odd boys. We have spoken of the mechs and the pain boys, but there are others, the weird boys. These are the psychers of the orc race. But unlike human psychers who draw power from the warp, weird boys act as sponges for the Wah, energy generated by their kin. Being a weird boy is not a gift. It is a burden. They can feel the excitement of the other orcs buzzing in their heads like a hive of angry hornets. If they do not release this energy, usually by vomiting blasts of green ectoplasm that melt tanks, their heads will literally explode. They are living artillery, dragged into battle in copper chains to keep them grounded, glowing with the collective hype of the army. They are the conduit through which the orc species touches the divine. So we have the biology, we have the society, we have the gods. The galaxy looks at the orcs and sees a nuisance, a barbaric remnant of a forgotten age. But they are wrong. The orcs are not a remnant. They are a rising tide. For 10,000 years, the Imperium has held them back. The Eldar have pruned them. The Tyranids have fought them. But the orcs are getting bigger. The wars are getting larger. The Wah fields are intensifying. There are whispers in the dark corners of the galaxy, whispers of a new beast, a prophet who speaks with the voice of Gork and Mork, a warlord who does not just want to fight, but to unite. His name is Gazkul Mag Uruk Thraka, and he is the end of the stalemate. Do you hear the drums? They are beating in unison now. The clans are gathering. The colors are blending into a single terrifying shade of green, the prophet of the eternal war. There is a name that is whispered in the bunkers of Armageddon, a name that makes even the gene-enhanced captains of the Space Marines tighten their grip on their bolters. It is a name that sounds like grinding gears and crushing stones. Gazshkul, Maguruk, Thraka. In the long, bloody history of the Green Tide, there have been many warlords. There have been beasts who threatened to swallow the Imperium whole. But Gazakul is different. He is not just a monster of muscle and rage, he is a visionary. He began as a simple soldier, a lowly boy on the backwater world of Urk. But fate, in the form of a bolter shell, intervened. The injury destroyed a portion of his brain, and a bionic replacement was crudely hammered into his skull by a mad pain boy. When he awoke, he did not see the world as it was. He saw the world as it could be. He heard the voices of Gork and Mork booming in the static of his metal mind, telling him that the galaxy was not just a place to fight, it was a place to conquer. He is the prophet of the Wah. Under his banner, the clans do not just brawl, they organize. He has led massive invasions against the hive world of Armageddon, testing the defenses of humanity, not to destroy them immediately, but to cultivate a better fight. To an orc like Gazgakul, a quick victory is boring. A long, grinding war that spans decades, that is paradise. He travels the stars now, moving from war zone to war zone, his fleet growing with every system he burns. And with the opening of the Great Rift, that tear in reality that split the galaxy in half, he has found a new purpose. The galaxy is broken, bleeding warp energy into real space. To the Imperium, this is the end times. To the Eldar, it is a tragedy. But to Ghazghkull, it is the greatest playground ever built. He is uniting the disparate empires of the Orks. He is gathering the speed freaks, the heavy gunners, the primitive beast snaggers. He is building a force that does not just want to raid, it wants to engulf. And this leads us to the final, terrifying truth of the Orc species. The question we asked at the very beginning, have they already won? Consider the state of the galaxy. The Eldar are a dying race, clinging to their craft worlds, terrified of the god that waits to devour their souls. Their existence is one of constant sorrow and discipline. They have lost. The Necrons are waking up to a galaxy they no longer recognize, soulless machines trapped in a mockery of life, seeking to reverse a biotransference that can never be undone. They have lost. The Imperium of Man is a rotting carcass, a regime of superstition and cruelty, fighting a desperate, losing battle against the dark, sustained only by the daily sacrifice of thousands of souls to a silent emperor. They are losing. But the Orks are never sad. They are never hopeless. They do not despair when they lose a battle because they know they can always come back for another go. They do not fear the future because the future is just more war. And war is what they love. They occupy more worlds than the Imperium. They are more numerous than the Tyranids. They are in every corner of the galaxy, from the glittering core to the dark halo stars. In a universe of grim darkness where there is only war, the species that loves war is the only species that can truly be called successful. The Old Ones created a weapon to fight the Necrons, but in doing so, they created the ultimate life form, a creature that thrives on conflict, a creature that turns the horror of the 41st millennium into a comedy of violence. So, as you drift into the quiet of the night, remember the green tide. Remember that while the rest of the universe screams in terror, the Orks are roaring with laughter. They are the fungal echo of a forgotten age. They are the unstoppable force that will eventually grind the stars to dust. And in the end, when the last sun flickers and dies, and the last human breath is drawn, the silence will likely be broken one last time. If you enjoyed this journey into the lore of Warhammer 40K and want to hear more stories from the grim darkness of the far future, or other worlds of fiction, please subscribe to History and Fiction for Sleep. Leave a comment below on what story you would like to hear next, and share this video with fellow travelers of the void. Thank you for listening.